If you're looking to build a strong career in data, then this video is for you. We've got seasoned industry veteran Andrew Madson here, and he's talking about all the things that he wished he knew when he was starting out in data so that he can help you impact your career. He'll talk about things like how promotion decisions are made, what young analysts can do to stand out and advance their career, and even share some tips and tricks and highlight some pitfalls that you want to avoid. It's a great video. Hope you'll enjoy it. Let us know what you think in the comments. Andrew, maybe if you could think about kind of that when you were just getting started, what would be some of the best advice that you wish you had gotten when you were starting out in your career that folks should hear?
Yeah, and I think this advice is the same whether you're in data or not, whether you're trying to be a data analyst or you're pursuing a different career. You really have to network, and you have to network genuinely and early. When you're trying to make a transition and looking for a job, that's the second best time to network. But the first time to network is when you don't really need anything and you're really genuinely interested in meeting people and expanding your community and finding people with similar interests. That'll really help expand your view of what's possible, because you'll be talking to people who are doing many different things, and that'll help you find maybe what's right for you. And it'll also support you as you run into challenges and opportunities along the way.
Yeah, it's funny. Networking came up in our last session. It was one of the audience questions, and same thing. I think that is such good advice. For me personally, as my career has progressed, more and more of my opportunities actually come directly from my network versus traditional applying. That it's just like that's how it sort of goes if you're doing it right, if you're building a good network. If you're doing a good job, folks like working with you. That's how you should expect it to happen. But you can be really proactive about it early on. I love it. Yeah. So Andrew, a lot of folks.
That's even true, John. Not to cut you off, but I think it's important to note that it's even true. We often think of networking as just outside of our company, like changing companies, changing careers, but it's super important to network inside your company.
Yeah.
When folks are trying to transition into data analytics from something else, often the best way or easiest path is by doing it inside your company. Yep. So making sure you have a strong network where you are is also super important.
Yeah. It reminds me of there was this guy that I worked at a large company with him. He was in the analytics group, and he was famous for, he would do, I don't know, multiple times a week, he would do these coffee chats, and you would just see him sitting in sort of the lounge area with a different person, like it's seemingly almost every day. And he was just really proactive about meeting everybody in the company. And it's something that I've tried to do anytime I'm joining a new company since seeing him. I definitely don't do it as good as he did, but I do try to implement it like when I'm coming into a new role. So yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, just try to get to know everybody, I think is really, really good advice. Curious, one thing that, I think a lot of the panelists in Open Campus don't have as much experience kind of on the manager side as you do. So I'd love to spend a lot of time there. People, when they're starting out, they're really curious about the promotion process, like don't really know how it works. They think if I just work hard, it'll happen. Could you help kind of demystify that a little bit and maybe even share some examples of like how it's worked at different companies?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Most of my career I've spent in leadership because I was already an executive in finance before I transitioned into data. So then I naturally moved into senior leadership in data. And hiring people and handling promotions and unfortunately terminations, which we won't talk about today, that's the most important part in addition to like strategy, but the people and getting the right people in the right seats and investing in them is a super important part of good leadership. And I'll start how I did it, and then I'll tell you how others may do it, which you may run into. So when I go to hire somebody, there's two things I look at. I look at what's the job description, and often I'll try to rewrite them because it's some canned job description where HR probably put it in ChatGPT and said, what should a data analyst do? And it's like Python, and I'm like, maybe not. But so I will rewrite the job description to be like, what's ideally, like what are the absolute core competencies that this skill needs to be? And then I'll look at my team and say, where are we as a team? And where do we want to be in the future? And what are some skills that could help us expand our capabilities as a team to grow and expand the program and have more influence and impact in the company? And that's where I put the preferred qualifications in. That's where Python actually might show up. Maybe I actually do need somebody with Python if we're going to take over some ETL pipelines or whatever, but maybe not. So that's how I approach it, is core competencies are in like the basic requirements. And then for me to expand my team and our impact or the overall program, maybe some preferred qualifications. And then when it comes to the interview process, that's what we have to go back to. We have to have a grid of like, here's the core competencies and maybe the preferred. Where does each candidate rank on each one of those so that we can have a objective decision-making process? Too early in my management career, I winged it. I was like, oh, I feel good about this person, or this person impressed me with their ability to speak. And I have to admit, it wasn't very objective. And I suspect that there are many hiring managers who unfortunately do it that way. So you not only have, it's a challenge for applicants because you do have to button up your skills and your resume, but to get those good feelings across to the hiring manager, you also have to work on your presence in the interview.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. I think when I was first starting off and I'd never been a manager before, I sort of thought my manager just gets to decide when I go from senior analyst to, or analyst to senior analyst. In your experience, is that how it works? Is it just the manager's decision? Is there like a larger conversation with other leaders around the company? How does it usually work?
It depends on the company for sure. So at some very large organizations, it was budget based a lot of the time, and also a little bit committee based, depending on how big the promotion was. But you really had to make a very strong case in a lot of big companies to promote your people. I would often just say that they were going to quit if I didn't promote them, and they were like, "Oh, okay, let's promote them." But
yeah.
In smaller companies, again, it's a budget consideration, but then the leadership has much more flexibility in just saying like, "This is a promotion." But what I would recommend is that if you don't know what the criteria are, your company may not have a criteria, which I think is bad. So what you can do with your leader is say, hey, here's my goal. It's to go from analyst to senior analyst. What exactly do I need to do to get there? And they may give you some general feedback to begin with, like, oh, you need to have more impact, be on bigger projects. And you say, okay, what would that look like? Or, hey, what if I did this? If I joined this project, or I took on some of these responsibilities, would that kind of check those boxes? And then it really gets your leader thinking about the criteria, but it also holds them accountable because they're telling you, yes, these things would help you get promoted. And now your one-on-ones are more structured. You can say, okay, I worked on this. Am I still on track? You know, so then instead of one-on-ones being like, oh, how's your current work? How are you doing? It's got that component of, okay, my goal is still to get promoted to senior, lead, principal, whatever it is. I'm doing these things we talked about. Am I still on track? And then it helps keep you and your leader accountable for growth.
Yeah. I love that advice. Like, if you're not sure what it looks like for you to get to the next level, like ask and do it proactively. And I think a lot of people don't want to do that. I think they think I don't know if they think they're like being needy or like, demanding and saying, hey, I should be there. But I think it's really not about that. It's about saying, hey, I want to become more valuable. Help me figure out what that looks like to the company. And I want to put in the work to increase my value there. And I think as a manager, like I want to hear that, like I want to know that my people are trying to expand and trying to help us in other ways that they aren't already. And I want to help them get there. And any good manager should. Yeah. It's really good advice.
100%. And then it helps me start thinking. I'm like, oh, here's a project, because then my role as a manager, I can help shepherd opportunities to those individuals who I'm working with to help them grow. Then they don't have to do it all on their own. But, everybody's busy. Your leader's busy. So you being super proactive and taking accountability for your own growth is very helpful and will serve you in the long run.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How about if for people who are thinking about trying to move up the ladder, any pitfalls, like any sort of career limiting maneuvers that they should avoid, like things that'll immediately get you thrown out of consideration, or any advice along those lines?
I mean, don't burn bridges. That's for sure. It's a small world, especially the longer you're in it, the more and more overlap you'll have with folks. So always have good relationships. Don't burn bridges is my first advice. And then it really depends on your company. So I choose my companies a lot of times based on the upward mobility. How much impact am I going to have? I've even taken pay cuts before. I know that's a privileged position to be in where I could have taken a pay cut, but because it was a better, more impactful role at a different company that had more career potential.
Yeah.
So I'm just strategic in that. Some companies you may come in and the analyst team has all been the same people for 7 years and nobody has moved on, and there's not a lot of opportunity. Maybe take that job, but immediately start looking for another role with more career growth. So not only the company is important, but also your leader and your team is insanely important to be able to grow.
Yep. So putting yourself in the right position, like with a good company on a good team, and being aware of that, I think that's really good advice. And definitely don't burn bridges. Like I think of, the folks that I started being an analyst with at kind of a big company, and they're all over the place, and you never would have guessed who would have been the most successful or which different roles they would be in. And, they're luckily, I think I didn't burn too many bridges. So didn't find myself in too much trouble. I'm curious, Andrew, so you've got your podcast and you're really active on LinkedIn. So I think you've done an amazing job of building a personal brand for yourself that's very much around data. Like if anybody looks you up, they're like, yep, this guy, super passionate, super knowledgeable about data. How important do you think that is for somebody else who's starting their career today? Would you recommend them doing some of those activities? Like what do you think about personal branding?
Yeah, I think personal branding is very important. And I think it gets more important the longer you're in the space and the higher up you want to go, whether it's on LinkedIn or not. I'd recommend LinkedIn, but now I'm in executive roles. I've been in executive roles for a little while, and a lot of that comes from my personal brand. Like getting these more senior level roles typically aren't the traditional job application. It's often either executive recruiting firms or other executives are talking about you to companies with opportunities, and they are relying on your brand. For practitioner roles, for entry data analysts, for mid senior level analysts, LinkedIn is a really great spot, because if it's almost like a referral. Like referrals work so well, because if I know somebody and they're vouching for you, that takes a lot of the risk off my table as a leader, because in the 3 hours I might total talk to you, if that, through the interview process, how well am I really going to get to know you? We may look at some projects, we may not. We may do a coding interview, we may not. But how you work and how you are as a teammate, and that can be a big unknown and frankly a big risk. So getting a referral from somebody is super helpful. It really translates over to LinkedIn. If you're putting projects and you're being thoughtful on LinkedIn and you're contributing and showing who you are and what your abilities are, that frankly takes a lot of that same risk off the table for me, because I'm already seeing a lot of what your capabilities are. And that helps me be a lot more comfortable with the hiring decision, rather than coming out of left field and being like, oh, fingers crossed that this person is everything that I think they are in the 3 hours I got to know them. So personal brand is huge.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's really good advice. And again, I'll echo that on the hiring manager side. It's hard to when you're trying to interview people and you're trying to decide if they're going to be a really good fit. Like, you think you get a good sense for the technical skills, for how you would interact with them, how they'd be with the rest of the team. But like you said, 3 hours is not a lot of time, and everybody's sort of on their best behavior, trying to paint themselves in the best light. So it's, I've definitely made hiring decisions that were wrong. And, later this person doesn't really work out. And so, like, totally agree that if somebody that I trust is willing to put their name on the line by making a referral, that's why that referral goes such a long way, because it's just, I think it has a much higher probability of success because of the stakes. Yeah. So that's an awesome one. So, folks, I'm going to put some links to where you can get more from Andrew in the chat here. So first is his LinkedIn. He's really active there. You can learn a ton for free there. Next is a YouTube channel, Insights by Design. That's an awesome channel. It's kind of a similar format to this, where you're the host and you've got new guests every week, and you've had some really awesome guests on there. I've seen the show quite a few times, and really, I think amazing content there. So if you guys like this live format, I would definitely recommend checking that out. I think I actually listened to it on Spotify, as well as it being on YouTube. And is it on like Apple and other places too, Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's everywhere.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah. So if you guys like audio, you like video, definitely check out Insights by Design, and the website is there too. So can't go wrong with that stuff. So let's stay on the personal branding. So talked about that being important, and LinkedIn in particular being important. If somebody wants to do better at building their personal brand on LinkedIn, what are some initial steps that they could take?
I mean, start small and start now. Nobody, except maybe Zach Wilson, just blows up on LinkedIn. Right. Everybody else, and Zach's insanely smart and deserves it, but everybody else really starts small, and we don't, it depends what your purpose is. So I guess I would say a few things. First, decide what you're trying to get out of it. For me, it started out as figuring out what educational content worked well, because I also teach a bunch of graduate data programs in a bunch of master's degrees. And so I was trying to figure out, like, what's the easiest way I can explain this concept. So it was fun for me. And then it started to grow, and I could see what resonated well with people. And then I started meeting new contacts and friends. And then I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then just kept expanding. So I think start small with a clear objective of what you're trying to accomplish. Zach Wilson, while we're on the topic, he shared with me there's a framework that he uses of like what type of content to post. It's show what you know, share about yourself, and then encourage others to grow.
Cool.
So I think he calls it like show, know, grow. But all that content is very valid. So I think just try to start doing it once a week, and then start trying to do it daily if you can. And I think your goal should fall within one of those three buckets for each post of show what you know to help others, encourage others to grow, and share a little bit about yourself so that people can know who you are.
Yeah, very, very cool. I hadn't heard Zach talk about that framework before, but it makes a lot of sense, and I like it. Yeah, and I love, just talking about starting small. You don't have to be an influencer to make an impact on your own career and your own personal brand. Like, I think for me, I started doing LinkedIn when I joined Maven, and we were trying to get this Maven platform off the ground. And I was like not a social media person. I was super nervous about putting myself out there. I thought like it was going to be embarrassing. People are going to be judging me and all that stuff. And I think you pretty quickly realize, like, the data community, it's people like Andrew who want to give back and like help folks. And everybody's pretty much on their best behavior on LinkedIn. There's not a lot of name calling and stuff like that. I think it's a really inviting space. And like you said, I've had similar experience where like I've made friends and connections and met really interesting people as a result of it. So I definitely recommend it. And I love the advice there. So, Andrew, if you're okay with it, I'd love to turn it over to the audience, and we'll put you in the hot seat with their live questions if you're game.
Please.
Hey there, hope you're enjoying the video. Sorry to interrupt, we'll get you right back to it. Right now, Maven Analytics is offering a deal that was just too big not to share it with you. We've got an early Black Friday sale, and you can save up to 50% off of Maven Analytics paid plans. So if you've been considering learning Excel, SQL, Power BI, Python, Tableau, and everything else that you need to become a data analyst or accelerate your career, now is the perfect time. Check it out at mavenanalytics.io. You can see the Black Friday offer in the banner at the top of the screen. You can't miss it. Again, if you're on the fence, there's never been a better time. We don't do a lot of these sales, so I hope that some people will take advantage. Now, enjoy the video. I'll let you get back to it. Thanks. Awesome. All right. So this is from Mizanur. And the question is, what should somebody look for in a potential employer to ensure that they support career growth and professional development in data? Like, how do you assess the employer as an employee?
Yeah, I think there's a few sources that I use. So first, if I know people who have worked there, I'll talk to them. And I always try to understand the bias, right? Like if you're talking to somebody who left under poor circumstances, what are the odds that they're going to have something nice to say, or at least unbiased to say about the company? So I do take some of that stuff with a grain of salt. But I do talk to people. I'll check Glassdoor and just get a good feel for the vibe of the company. I also check the dates on some of those reviews for the company, because some of them may be old and maybe they went through, some leadership changes because there were issues. So I will check Glassdoor. But then if I get to the interview stage, I really drill down on the manager. I don't care about the recruiter. The recruiter's job is just to give you the best possible view of the company. So that's super biased. But often the leader and then the team members will be very honest. And I go in prepared with questions, asking about career growth or asking about team dynamics or who gets to make the decision, or for me as a leader, I'm like, if I want to buy a $250,000 license for something, who do I have to talk to? Like, can I do that? Is there a steering committee? And that'll help me understand what kind of red tape there is to get stuff done. But yeah, I would use online sources, understand that there's some bias included there, especially if it's all ex-employees. So, there's some of that. And then really drill down on the leader and the teammates if you get to the interview stage.
I love all that advice, and I think the nugget that I'm echoing right now is the manager matters so much. Two people, especially in a large company, can have completely different experiences if they have a fantastic manager or a manager that doesn't really care about being a mentor and coaching somebody. So definitely, absolutely, such good advice. Really drill in there. This one's from Vishali. What strategies helped you become recognized or valued in your company, especially early on? Think back to those entry level, second level roles.
Yeah, and this is something I wanted to touch on because visibility is super important. I'm naturally an introvert. I love talking to people, but it takes it out of me. So if I can just sit in the corner and chill, I probably will. But often it's extroverts who get promoted because it's natural. It's easy for them to get out and know people and talk to them and build those connections. So you need to build that visibility. If you're an introvert like I am, you need to be purposeful about it. So first of all, you have to be good at your job, period. You have to crush your current role. Once you're already doing great in your current role, then you start expanding. You start asking to be on other projects. You start networking with other leaders, which can help with having a conversation with your manager and saying, hey, I would like to do more, and which generally they should love. Maybe it's training new employees. Maybe it's getting on a bigger project or helping with a budget or something. Look for ways to get involved in more and with new people. Especially if you want to network within your company, getting on bigger projects with other leaders is a super great way to show other leaders that you're capable, and they may poach you from your team.
Yeah.
So I think that first, crush your current role. That's table stakes. You can't do these other strategies if you're not currently performing in your existing role. Start looking for larger projects within your company, and then call it out. So when you have one-on-ones with your manager, you're doing your quarterly or semi-annual reviews, make sure you're keeping notes of all the awesome stuff you did, and be uncomfortable sharing it, because some of us are more naturally inclined to not brag about all the awesome stuff we did. You have to take control of your growth. You have to share your successes. You need to call attention to them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's such good advice there. I think one of the things that stands out to me is when I was starting out, I sort of thought like my manager was the whole universe. And I love how you're saying there's other leaders in the company. Their opinions matter. How do you impress them, not just your manager? And I had an experience where I wasn't in the room for this. They called them calibration sessions. It was at a large company where they decide who gets promoted. And my manager was making a case for my promotion. And I have a friend who was in the room, and he told me about this later. And he said my manager was losing like it was not going to happen. And then another leader who I didn't even work with, I'd never done a specific project with him. He stepped in and he had a bigger voice in the company. And he said, look, I really think we got to take care of this guy so whatever reason it was. I don't know what I did to make him like me that early on, but he got me there. And so it's just so interesting. Like I had no idea that's how it worked when I was an analyst trying to figure this out. So really, really good advice there about just like, you need to have that brand even internally within the company. It's so phenomenal. This one I'm curious. So, okay, this is from Manolo. Says they just started learning with Maven. They're focusing on Power BI and SQL, which are good places to focus. How should they know their level and like how their skills relate to what they can deliver to a company? Like if you're not sure where your skills measure up, what are some good ways to kind of get a sense for where you stand?
Yeah, I think doing a project. So try to think in your head and simulate what would a project potentially look like. Like I'm going to get a bunch of messy data and have some vague request from a stakeholder, and I need to clarify that, clean the data, and then present it in an insightful and effective way in Power BI. But I wouldn't stress too much about that, to be honest. What I would focus more on is your ability to learn. If you're comfortable being able to learn Power BI or looking stuff up that you don't understand in Power BI, like if you're like, oh, I don't know how to do this in DAX, and you're comfortable Googling it or going to the Maven resources and figuring out how to do it in DAX, you're going to do great, because no matter what you learn, SQL, Power BI, maybe you go to a company that uses Tableau or Click. Maybe you go to a company that's like, hey, we know you know SQL, but like for a little bit, we need you to do a bunch of stuff in Google Sheets. You don't know. But if you have that ability to learn and you're confident in your ability to look stuff up and to figure it out and implement it, you'll do great. So I wouldn't focus too much on like, am I a beginner, intermediate, advanced Power BI? It's, can I learn new things in a reasonable period to the point where I could do them reasonably?
Yeah,
that's more important.
Yeah, I love that. I love that part of the answer, and I love how you said like, just get some data and try to do a project, because I think it sounds like, the person asking this question, you're probably thinking like there's some sort of a scoring and a ranking event, and like that's not really a thing. It's really about, can you do the work? When you're in the seat, can you figure it out? So I love that advice. I teach SQL. I've been using SQL for over 10 years. Every day on the job, I still go to Google and look up syntax, sometimes stuff that's in my own courses. So it's you just got to be able to figure stuff out. Nobody expects you to know everything. So you're probably better than you even think you are already. Here's an interesting one. So this one's from Mohammed, and I know the name's wrong on here, but what advice do you have for overcoming feelings of imposter syndrome and building confidence in abilities?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think John will probably echo this, that nobody doesn't have imposter syndrome. Like, I meet with C-suite executives. I've reported up to C-suite executives for a while. Even some of them have imposter syndrome, but what you need to work on is dealing with it. And how you deal with it is by assessing what needs to be done and creating a plan to achieve it, and then having a feedback loop along the way. Imposter syndrome, I think, stems from you not knowing whether or not you're doing a good job. So if you have a clear plan of action and you build in a feedback loop that's going to tell you, are you on track or are you not on track along the way, that's going to help you feel better as you go along and execute. That feeling will never 100% go away, but you'll at least feel better about it if you're like, okay, I've got this big project, I'm overwhelmed, I've got important stakeholders in a tight timeline. Okay, what exactly do I need to do? And who should I be checking in with along the way to make sure that I'm not 100% off track and it's going to blow up in my face, which it probably won't. Like, realize that you're probably over catastrophizing the situation. But if you have that feedback loop along the way, then it's not one big unknown for a long time. It's just little tweaks here and there, which will help you feel better.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome answer. Yeah, you're definitely not alone feeling that way. There's an unbelievable, endless universe of things that you could know and be an expert at. And like, none of us are experts at more than 1% of them, so like everybody feels that way. I think it's really good advice. Just trying to get through it. Let's see, there's a really good question here. For those just starting out, what specific projects or experiences should you prioritize to make yourself more attractive to potential employers? Anything people should be looking to tackle?
There's not a magic bullet. I will say that if we're talking about in the interview process, like what projects would be most attractive to interviewers and help you stand out, domain specific, I think, is very helpful. So if you're interviewing at a investment firm or a finance company, maybe do a finance, like envision what their problems are and like what kind of data that you're going to be working with. Do a project specifically on that. Is that required? No, but we're talking about what's going to help you stand out. If you're interviewing at an education company, think of what kind of problems would I be helping these stakeholders solve? Let me build a project around that. I know the head of AI at a big mutual fund. Well, no, it's not. It's a life insurance company in Boston. Maybe John knows them. He's in Boston. And he got this job because he was literally thinking, like, this company he had heard wants to start an AI program. And he's like, what would they need to do? And he decided that the first step would be that they needed a common ontology and they needed a knowledge graph. So he built a knowledge graph and got in touch with, at this point he's a senior leader, right? So, but he got in touch with the CTO and presented him the knowledge graph. And he's like, this is exactly what we need, and hired him. So I know that's a very extreme example, but if you can think through like what problems do they have and how could I address those, and then show them that in a project, I mean, that's game over. You're already demonstrating that you can deliver on what they need.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I think about when I've hired folks, I've never hired, like, I'm never thinking, oh, I need a generic data analyst or a generic data scientist. I'm trying to hire a data analyst to solve marketing problems or to be a product analyst and make the customer experience better for my customers, And so it really is always about that specific type of problem. And I love that advice. Like, if you can tailor your pitch or the projects you're working on to that, then I'm like, yeah, of course, that's exactly what I need. I want this person. It's really, really good advice. Awesome. Let's see. So this is Carolina. Let's see. Why didn't that go up here? There we go. Carolina says, just lost my job. I'm an aspiring data analyst. Sorry, Carolina, about the job. With background in finance and project management. Any advice to people like where you should start if you're starting from scratch in data? Yeah, what do you think for somebody like that?
Yeah, and I think, and again, sorry, Carolina, to hear that happened. That's a tough situation to be in. But the good news is that you have superpowers that a lot of data teams need. I mean, project management, I usually go into companies and fix data analytics programs is what I've historically done. And one of the things I bring is extensive project management skills and program management. So you having that and being able to describe how these other skills would translate into a data environment would be key. So as you're going along and you're learning the foundational courses through Maven, look for synergies between your existing skill set, which sounds deep and very helpful and also unique, and how that could translate into data world. I mean, project management is extremely important, and a lot of data analysts, unfortunately, have to learn that retroactively. They're already halfway through a project that's falling behind, and then their manager's like, hey, fix this. And they're like, oh, crap, let me Google project management. And then finance. Now you're good with numbers. You understand the relationship between numbers, and depending on your specific area of finance, you may understand what's most important to business units, which is very critical. One of the reasons that I was successful in data was because I stayed in financial services, which was very attractive to a lot of companies because they're like, oh, Andrew was literally an executive in financial services. So him coming into data, he already knows what our executive in financial services is going to need because he was him. So you having that background in finance, you have a superpower that as a data analyst, you can relate deeply to what the finance department's going to need. So building projects around that and then being able to articulate how your project management skills would help bring value to the team would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, amazing advice. And it's a really common type of a question and a concern people have. They're so focused on these data skills that they think they're behind in, they forget that they have those other superpowers. So like perfect call out. And when I read the finance and project management, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, oh, that is a great foundation to be coming from. And I love your the general advice of like, if you can somehow sort of stay in the same domain or type of company that you already have experience in another functional role in, it's a big leg up over other analysts that don't have that experience yet. So kind of along those lines. So Ratiba here is interested in healthcare roles, but not able to find any projects to build healthcare projects for their portfolio. What do you recommend? And I love that you are looking for healthcare specific projects. Can't find any though, Andrew. Where would you point them to try to find some of these things?
Yeah, and it depends what area of healthcare and what you want to do, but there is a lot of publicly available healthcare data. Yeah. And one of the master's courses that I used to teach, I don't teach it right now, the capstone project was that these students needed to create their own project around something that was important to them. And a lot of them were nurses at the time. And so they would often do healthcare data. So they would find publicly available healthcare data that tracked, there's so many different things. I saw like trying to predict patient falls. I saw things trying to just visualize COVID-19 response. All that data is publicly available. If you got a really nice dashboard in Power BI with publicly available COVID-19 data, and you could draw an insight from there and call it out, awesome. But I would do a little more looking into just what data is available and then visualize what projects you could create. But if you're Googling like healthcare project, that may not come up. But if you Google publicly available healthcare data, there are tons and tons of options.
Yeah, there really are. It's like overwhelming how much stuff there is. Kaggle's amazing. They've got hundreds of thousands of data sets and you can search it. Data.world is similar, probably rivals Kaggle. So there's so much stuff there. I love how you've done this Q&A hot seat session, Andrew. It's been amazing. Such good advice here. We're about at time. Folks, could you guys give some love to Andrew for all the great wisdom that he's dropped here, and definitely please check him out on LinkedIn. Check out his podcast. Andrew, super good time on my end. Pleasure having you. Would love to collaborate with you anytime, and thank you so much for joining us, and have fun in San Fran.
Thanks, everyone. Thrilled to be here.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Hey there, I hope you enjoyed this video. This was part of our open campus event where we ran 24 sessions in front of a live audience over the course of 2 weeks. It was a ton of fun. We did all these live sessions and we opened up our entire learning platform for free. You did not need a paid account to take advantage of all the courses. So folks could learn Excel, SQL, Power BI, Tableau, Python, etc. All the stuff that you need to learn data analysis skills and take your career to the next level. If you missed it this year, keep an eye out. We'll definitely be doing this again next year, probably again in October. We would love to see you there. And the last thing that I'll leave you with, if you're looking to take your skills to the next level right now, and you've been on the fence about a Maven Analytics paid plan, we are currently running our early Black Friday sale. This is the absolute best time to pay for Maven Analytics if you want to, so don't miss out. You'll have the opportunity to save up to 50% on paid plans, which is a pretty great opportunity. You can check out all the details at mavenanalytics.io. Just look for the early Black Friday banner at the top of the site. You can't miss it. Hope that we'll see some of you there as well. Thanks for watching.